Okay, welcome to the second video. I still have some closing remarks to make about the Slav. I didn't quite manage in the first video, and I'm a bit surprised how much time this actually took. Okay, I was at this point where it's a choice between knight f3 and going for e3. One important thing is, if you want to go for the e3 lines, it makes much sense to play knight c3 here first. Of course, you could play knight f3 with the intention of going for the e3 lines, but this gives black extra options. Black now can play bishop f5 or bishop g4, which are both very solid. White can play for slight edge here, but it's very tiny, and it's also a very slow and positional type of game. If you go for this move order and then e3, this is very helpful because you don't have the knight on f3. This has two consequences. The move bishop g4, while playable, just goes into thin air. You could just play f3, for instance, or bishop f5. You have a good response with cd5, cd5, queen b3, and now b7 is just attacked, and also d5 needs to be covered somehow. So the natural move for black, queen b6, can be just answered by taking off d5. Yeah, so this is a problem. Black needs to retreat here, which is well, possible, but of course not what black intended to do. White has a slight advantage here because of the lead in development. Okay, e3 isn't ideal because of the bishop, but it's still a slight edge. So this knight c3 e3 move order limits a lot the possibilities that that black has. If you're satisfied with this line, for instance, you really should use this move order, because there's not much black can do to avoid it. You can go a6, of course, or g6, but it's in no way a comparison to the lines with knight f3 and taking on c4, which is really a huge body of theory. a4, bishop f5. Instead of bishop f5, black might go bishop g4, knight s6. It's a lot of stuff. Well, just in general, I like knight e5 here to go f3 and e4 in the future, but it's a lot to study. Okay, I guess this was the main outline of the Slav. Let's now have a quick look at the Queen's Gambit accepted. Black takes on c4. Yeah, here white basically has got two options: recapturing the pawn after playing e3 or e4. And I think white really should take advantage of the fact that he's played second c4 and play e4 here. It's just the most aggressive way to combat this. Now black has mostly 4 moves actually. It's a lot of choice. He can play both sensible knight moves or the sensible pawn moves. Let's start off with knight f6. This always leads to the same kind of position. This is just a sample line where white enjoys the nice center. So it's got some central advantage, nice development, and it's got more space. This is really a sharp line. Black might go for a long castle. So it's a fight, but in general, white is considered to be slightly better here. Other knight move, knight c6 is also possible, where I'll just give a quick overview. Knight f3 to cover d4, bishop g4, d5, knight e5. Actually, this line looks a little bit like a Chigorin defense. It's a little bit of a mix of a Queen's Gambit accepted and Chigorin. There's more than one line, which is good for white, but this is just one I can recommend. Get the pawn back and enjoy the slight central advantage. Black's other options here are c5. It's not played very often. The main line then is d5. It's just good to advance in the center. Then e6. Bishop c4 takes, knight takes, bishop takes, and so on. White also has got some, still got the errors going here, some nice advantage with a strong bishop on d5. So it's actually useful here because white is really threatening. Bishop takes f7 now. Okay, black will attend this, I guess, with knight somewhere, knight c6 or something. Yeah, white is just a little bit better here. Extra pawn in the center and the strong bishop. Main move is e5, and this generally leads to positions like this: e5, e4, takes, bishop b4 check. Other option is knight c6. Very often it comes to a position where white at some point gets back the pawn on d4. This is just a sample line. This has been popular recently. Yeah, let's stop here. It's already move 14, where white has got some threat on e7. And yeah, in general, white often gets the pawn back later, and it's just a position where white has some space advantage with the pawn on e5. This is not little to study. It's a bit of an effort to look at this, but okay, the Queen's Gambit accepted is really a serious option. So I recommend e4. Other main option, of course, is go knight f3 and e3, but this is just not as aggressive, and it's also a little bit of theory to look at. The next line, and the most important, arguably, besides the Slav, is e6. Actually, e6 is the classical way of defending the Queen's Gambit, but it's from a repertoire point of view, it's not that much of an effort to study. I think the lines in Slav, for instance, if you want to play in an aggressive fashion against the Slav, you need to study much more in comparison to e6. But this is also due to the fact that you can play knight c3 here and not have committed the knight on f3. For instance, after d4, d5, knight f3, the lines I'm going to show are just not working. Black now has a couple of options. The most common option is knight f6 still, especially on a little bit lower level than world class. Other possible lines are bishop e7, which we will study last here, but which is important, and c6 is possible, the triangle variation. Here actually it also depends what kind of lines you like to allow and you don't like to allow. I recommend to play e4 here. It's just yeah, the toughest move for black. Black then takes on e4 and gives this check. White sacrifices a pawn here, but he's got very nice compensation in form of the two bishops. f1 and especially the one on b4 is very strong. It will prevent black from castling short for a while, or force black to make other concessions, and especially the dark squares are really weak. This line maybe is theoretically okay for black, but it's difficult to play. But it's not something you can just play offhand. You need to study a couple of more moves here. Take it a little bit further in the theory. Other idea here, of course, instead of e4, is to play knight f3 or e3. This is, of course, really related to the Slav lines. If you play e3, for instance, and black plays knight f6, you're just back into the Maron. But of course, black might try f5. And if you have some line there that you like, for instance, an aggressive option here is to play g4, which is sharp. Sorry, which is quite sharp. Then you can also simply go for e3 here. Other possibility is knight f3, which has got the advantage that it basically prevents the stone wall setup, because f5 is just bad because of bishop f4. I won't go into you can look it up, it's horrible for black. But knight f3 allows black to take here and hold on to the pawn actually, or play this is a notable variation. If you have something ready there, you can also play knight f3. But it's general, it's sharp stuff. Black usually plays this setup if he plans to play really sharply. So you need to have one light prepared for e4 or knight f3, e3, but you have to look it up. It's really necessary to do some specific preparation here. For instance, let's just say you play e3 and he's playing f5. If you then play without any specific idea, knight f3, bishop e2 and so on, black equalizes easily. You need to have some idea here. g4, as I just said. Another idea is bishop d3 and queen c2, knight e3. There needs to be something specific prepared here. The easiest, of course, in terms of move orders is just e4, but it's sharp. Black also, of course, can go for Tarrasch defense. There, of course, white just takes, and here it's really, yeah, you don't have much choice here. With the Tarrasch, you just need to go for the main line. There is just nothing else. If you want to play for an edge, which is the main line is g3. Interesting offbeat line is bishop f4. You can look at this if you want to avoid the mainline theory here. It's a bit tricky, and it's playable. g3, of course, continues with mostly knight f6, bishop g2, bishop e7, castles, and then white has to decide if he wants to take on c5 or bishop g5, which is the main move, I think. Interesting also is b3, which is tricky and not so well known, but it's got some drops of poison in it. But really, there's not much choice. Everything else is just okay for black. Okay, now a quick outline, because the time is running out for the second video already. What I will do against knight f6. I really should strongly suggest to play the exchange variation. cd5, ed5, bishop g5. And this also applies for bishop e7, after which I also recommend to exchange on d5. And this will be the third video, which will deal with both kinds of exchange variations.